my philosophy is you should try to make the right thing easier to do versus the wrong thing harder. So a lot of times cybersecurity professionals will try to make the wrong thing as hard as possible. But to quote Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. So if you just make something so hard you think nobody will do it, that developer who's just angry enough at you, he's going to find a way to circumvent that control. One thing I was reading into recently, going back to AI, is how adversarial groups are leveraging AI to be more effective than ever. The same way that businesses are trying to use AI to gain more revenue or more market share or achieve their mission more effectively, so too are adversarial groups, right? And the way they're doing this is so ingenious, from social engineering to technical attacks to package hallucinations. It's just very clever. One thing that I take back from the military is task and purpose. So when you lead in the military, your job is to give task and purpose. There's often in the movies, you just get the task. You're just like, go do this thing. But the more effective way is go do this thing because this is the reason why.
Hello, Jimmy. Welcome to Be Fearless podcast.
Hi, Sasha. Great to be here.
Yeah, I just want to give a brief background on you for our listeners that might not be aware. We're very excited for this conversation, and Jimmy is actually Vice President of Cybersecurity at PBS, the public broadcasting service that I'm sure our listeners from the US will know. And your path to cybersecurity started in college, and from there, your career took you to US Army, where you gained a lot of leadership experience, and then you went through various security roles, including Palo Alto, Venture Global, before landing at PBS. And outside of PBS, you also mentor for many students, and recently completed your MBA at George Mason University. So I would be super curious to learn how you got there as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we just love to learn more about you. And I think one of the things in my research, I learned that your cybersecurity journey started in college, where the 1995 movie Hackers sealed your decision to study cybersecurity. So how does the reality of being a security leader compare to what you imagined before?
All right. My journey did start in college. You do really good research, and I think you found that from another interview I did a while back. I think that might be a little romanticized. It wasn't just the movie. I didn't see Angelina Jolie, and I was like, yes, Hackers, let's do it. But it is a great movie. It doesn't hold up as well. Hot take maybe for some people. But yeah, when I was going to college and I was trying to find what to do, and I almost did a whole lot of things until I found a program that had cybersecurity incorporated into it, and it was still relatively new at the time. Honestly, I could tell you, looking back, hindsight, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Even going through school, I can look back now and say, oh, I had a CISSP book was one of my textbooks. At the time, I had no idea what that really was truly until I got into the field and started doing the work. And it's all hindsight. So I'm very happy with my choice back then. I thank myself back in college for making that decision. But I never in 100 years could have forecast or projected what might have come.
Yeah. And, everyone has very different background. I think back in those days, many security leaders actually recite that at that time, there wasn't proper degree that was called cybersecurity.
Yeah.
So many people started from different paths. And I know that you started from military service, then went into private sector. How does this transition happen in the first place? And how did you get opportunity to join PBS?
That's a great question, Sasha. It's a tough transition. And one of the things I find a lot of personal gratification in is helping service members who are making that transition, because it's tough. I went into the military and I was indoctrinated, for lack of a different word. And I learned all the acronyms and I learned the way the military does everything. And then when you're getting out, you have to relearn a lot of things. My first resume coming out of the military was not acceptable to civilian standards. But again, it's all hindsight. So I was very fortunate that I had mentors who looked at my resume and gave me feedback. And that was just invaluable for me to make the transition. It was still difficult, just translating the things you did in the military to the things you did in the civilian world. And they are very similar, a lot of them, some of them very unique. But once you can figure out how to translate it, then it was magic. I think what I took away most from the military was just teamwork, collaboration, the missions first, and just never stop. I would never quit. I would never accept defeat. I would never leave a fallen comrade. And I will always place, I already messed it up. It's been that long, but the warrior ethos, right? Those things that are just drilled into the core of who you are and what you do, I think translate really well into anything you do in the future.
Yeah. And I think especially when it comes to cybersecurity, right? Are there like some specific traits that really draws people from military to cybersecurity? What is it that they have in military that you're like, yes, that's kind of translates into cyber?
Yeah, I think a lot of the terminology we use is very similar. So there's a red team handbook that's military doctrine, right? You've got adversaries, you've got defenses, you've got just a lot of very similar terminology. I have a lot of friends of mine who got out of the military and they went to be police officers. That's a very common transition. And I think it's also a very common transition to go from the military to cybersecurity. And I think there's this common thread from cybersecurity to law enforcement to the military, where a lot of the language is very similar. And really at the core of what we're doing in each of those is trying to keep people safe. So I think it's just a very natural transition to go from military to law enforcement and or to cybersecurity. They're all kind of related with a common thread.
Yeah. And if we talk about your work at PBS, right? How did this whole thing started? Like, how did you learn about it, and how do you think it's different from other industries?
Yeah, how did I get started? I would say it's at the intersection of preparation and opportunity. So a lot of luck in getting to where I am. I think coming from the military, we're very focused on the mission. Nobody joins the military for the pay. There's no pay involved, but you've got the mission. And coming to a nonprofit, I think the same thing holds true, right? You come to a nonprofit for the mission. So I think coming with the mindset that I had in the past of mission first, going to an organization like PBS where the mission is first and the mission is everything, it really resonates and really connects, and it makes me feel deeply appreciative to be with such an organization.
Yeah, and your work, I know that it involves a lot program management. What does it exactly entail, and what are other priorities that you work on as a CISO?
Yeah, I think from the program management side of the house, I would say that probably every CISO does program management. Cybersecurity is a program of work. So it's a series of smaller projects all lumped under a larger umbrella. I would say kind of the core pillars of what I do. Cybersecurity that you would think of in the traditional sense. We've got business continuity is something that falls under my organization, data privacy, and then IT networking, which is a little bit of a out of left field, but those are the four core areas, and there's overlap in all of them. But that's what my primary focus is here at PBS.
Yeah, and then when we talk about data privacy, today is probably one of the most important times to bring up this topic, right? With development of so many tools out there. What is your approach? We have to touch upon Gen AI, right?
Yeah, always.
To data privacy. And are you a little bit bearish or bullish on it? What's your take on it?
Great question, Sasha. I think it's clear that I'll just say AI, all-encompassing generative AI and the like, is a huge opportunity. It will be a force multiplier. It will change the way we do everything. At the same time, I'm very concerned about it. Right? I think I'm concerned about the risks that it poses. Like any new and emerging technology, it will pose new and different kinds of risks. And we need to be very agile, very mindful, and very proactive in the way that we address these different types of risks. They're very similar, but they're very different at the same time. So I'm on the fence. I see the light. I'm very excited for it. It's going to be an exciting time. At the same time, spending a lot of my thought process day in, day out, trying to figure out how do we get ahead of this before something bad happens.
Is it something that you keep on adopting within your company, or is it something that you're still trying to be a little more careful about?
Yeah, I think us, like many organizations, are trying to figure out how does it fit in, right? What are those use cases where it makes the most sense? What is the cost of implementing it? And the cost is all encompassing, not just the cost of a Microsoft Copilot license, but the cost of data security, identity access management, and change management, compared to the potential returns on investment. I think we're doing that assessment really thoroughly as an organization, like I think many are. At the same time, we've got groups that are much more experimental and focused on innovation. So they're at the cutting edge trying to figure out how can we leverage this faster. So it's a delicate balance, right? I think us, like every organization, is trying to figure out how to do it, but how to do it safely at the same time.
Yeah. Safety of data is so important. And I just read recently the Harvard Business Review where they said AI adoption and data privacy are the top two, priorities when it comes to cyber. So this is very exciting time, and I'm sure as a more of a business-centric CISO, this is something on top of your mind. But how do you manage to balance security requirements with business objectives? Because sometimes they might be going against each other. How do you sort of choose between the two?
Yeah, great question. I would say, it's a balance. Security is not a priority, but it's a requirement. So, developers need to develop. Accountants need to account. Nobody's number one priority outside of the cyber team is often cybersecurity, but it's something that needs to be common throughout everything that we do. I think, again, it's a cost benefit, and we have to weigh the two things. What I never want to do in my role is stifle the business or prevent the business from accomplishing something. I think my philosophy as a cybersecurity leader is sometimes better is best. So that being not seeking perfection, right? There might be the perfect way to implement a solution to mitigate as many possible controls as we can. But sometimes that will stifle or slow down the business so much that is just not, when compared to the alternative, the best course of action. So sometimes it's perfectly good, if not better, to just move the needle to be better than you were yesterday.
Yeah. And as I speak to quite a few CISOs, there is this, seems to be a bit of a battle between how do I make my security seamless to the end user, but at the same time, make sure that there is actual security, right? What is your take? Are you more of a seamless security school, more of a there should be some friction? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my wife does UX, so we talk all the time, and I listen to the things she does and struggles with. I think that influences me a lot of times in wanting to put the user experience at the forefront of what we do. My philosophy is you should try to make the right thing easier to do versus the wrong thing harder. So a lot of times, individuals, cybersecurity professionals, will try to make the wrong thing as hard as possible. But to quote Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. So if you just make something so hard you think nobody will do it, that developer who's just angry enough at you, he's going to find a way to circumvent that control. Versus, what is the real problem, and what is the right behavior that we're trying to have everybody adopt, and is there a way that we can implement a solution that makes the right thing even easier to do, so they don't even have to consider the wrong thing. It's not easy, And I've not always been successful, but it's something that is at the forefront of everything I do. And I always strive to keep in mind the business, the user experience, and being as low friction as we possibly can be.
Yeah, and with so many attacks coming up these days, right? You really hope that whatever tools come in place, they protect users at their best, but at the same time make it seamless. And, with the migration towards SaaS apps and the cloud, employees are spending so much time on the browser these days. With the browser as an increasingly large attack surface, how has this affected your security strategies?
Yeah, I think as the trends ebb and flow, and as browser security and other topics become more prevalent threats, what we continue to focus on is defense in depth. So not relying on any single solution as the silver bullet or the fix all, right? But trying to ensure that we've got controls, both technical and administrative, at multiple layers to help mitigate some of the threats that are emerging and proliferating through the world right now.
Okay. So your approach is sort of relying on multiple things at the same time. Okay.
Yeah.
And we actually, so one of the things that we like to do is we also researchers, right? So we discover so many browser-based attacks, such as polymorphic extensions that can bypass traditional measures such as MFA, SWIGs, EDRs. How should CISOs enhance their cyber resilience to prepare for such emerging threats?
Yeah, I think when I hear the word resilience, I think of the inevitability of something bad happening one day. So just a moment ago, I mentioned about the layers of defense, the defense in depth. Those are really the preventative steps, right? Putting the controls in place to try to ensure that bad things don't happen. But anytime I hear resilience, I think of business continuity, disaster recovery, crisis management. So every CISO should be putting a great deal of thought into those elements, the less technical elements, as well as the technical elements, to ensure that when something bad happens, because it's still a matter of when, not if, that the business is positioned well, where the core business functions, the essential supporting activities are able to continue despite the disruption, and the business is able to continue to achieve its outcomes in its mission.
How do you manage to sort of make sure that these preventative measures are in place without at the same time putting too many resources into it, right? Because it's a big balance of resources, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's a never-ending game of balancing this. A lot of times, some organizations go best of breed in everything. I think my philosophy has always been finding the right-sized solution. So sometimes the best in breed solution is either unattainable because of budget or resources, right? There's an excellent solution we were evaluating, but they said, here's the infrastructure, here's the architecture. And in my head, I'm like, I'm going to need 2 engineers 24/7 to maintain this thing. I'm going to need an analyst. I'm going to need all these people, and I just don't have it. So we sacrifice the best in breed to find a right-sized solution that may not have 100% of the capabilities as the 800-pound gorilla, but we wouldn't have to throw 3 or 4 full-time equivalents at this problem to try to just have the thing up and running.
Yeah, I think today is more than ever when security leaders emphasize this, flexibility in whatever solutions they decide to go for, because as you said, there are strengths and budgets, and not necessarily also budgets, but also manforce, right? Mm-hmm. In general, how do you see the most biggest threats nowadays, and how do you typically combat them, especially as a media organization?
One thing I was reading into recently, going back to AI, is how adversarial groups are leveraging AI to be more effective than ever. The same way that businesses are trying to use AI to gain more revenue or more market share or achieve their mission more effectively. So too are adversarial groups, right? And the way they're doing this is just so ingenious, from social engineering to technical attacks to package hallucinations. It's just very clever, and just 100 new things to worry about with regards to adversarial groups using artificial intelligence. We continue to try to do the basics really, really well, because I still think the basics form the foundation of everything you should be doing. While at the same time understanding the market, understanding the threat landscape, and trying to keep up with the onslaught of new threats that are constantly emerging.
Yeah. How do you think threats are different in the media company versus the ones that you worked before? I can imagine it's quite different.
I think there's a lot of similarity. There are minor differences, but at the end of the day, I think what we're trying to maintain, just going back to the CIA triad, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our systems, right? And the things that pose a risk to those three are the same types of things that pose a risk to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the finance sector or of any other sector. I think the threat landscape is probably a little bit different. The individuals who may target our organization may target us for different motives, having different motives in mind versus the financial sector or other sectors. But at the end of the day, I think the controls, again, both technical and administrative, are still equally effective across industries. So I think wherever you are, there's just so many similarities when it comes to enterprise risk management that I don't put too much thought into the differences, but more so where those foundations and those fundamentals, again, yield the most value for the business.
This is very business centric of you to spot the common trends across different industries. And is it something that you picked up as you were completing your MBA? Because you were doing it while you were working full time. What motivated you to do it in the first place?
I'm just a crazy person, I guess. Looking back at it, I did full time. I also wanted to do in-person classes because I like the experience of being surrounded by people, having the professors. I prefer that to online learning. It's just my preference. Everybody's different. So what I would do is I'd go to work 9 to 5, and then I'd get off and I'd go to George Mason and I'd do 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. a couple of days a week. And then I'd spend a weekend studying. So it was a lot. The MBA helped me become more bilingual. So I spoke cybersecurity very well. Going through the MBA program and surrounding myself in that environment really helped me pick up more business acumen, have the right lexicon, the right way to speak, and a much better understanding of accounting, finance, and just operations, how the business works, how businesses are formed and governed. I think things that have helped influence me throughout my career are just excellent managers, excellent leaders that I've had. I've often reported to CIOs in prior organizations, and the CIO is a lot of times very business centric as well. So I get to pick the best parts of every leader that I've ever worked for and kind of emulate as much as I can those elements.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely necessary, because at the end of the day, you have to be able to speak the same language with these people, right? Otherwise, you're not trying to achieve the same objectives. So
or they just don't know what you're saying. You're like, yes, the flux capacitor needs to have the qubit recalibrated, and they're like, I don't know, get out of here. I don't know what you're saying right now.
Yeah, with the Google Translate.
Yeah, Google Translate for sure.
Yeah, and how would you then, considering all the knowledge that you acquired while doing your MBA, right? How would you advise a highly technical security leader to develop their business sense and vice versa?
I would say you don't have to do an MBA. I think the MBA was helpful, but what's helped me more in my own experience is going out and talking to the business. So I make it a point. We've got multiple offices and at other organizations, multiple locations as well. But I make it a point to walk the halls and poke my head in, meet other leaders in the business, introduce myself, understand what they're doing. and really just building relationships. I think that more than any degree is so much more valuable when you can talk to the business, understand what they're doing, understand what's important to them. So when you've got a large initiative coming up and you can better understand this solution will cause friction in these ways, the business is trying to do this, you may have diametrically opposed objectives or things that you care about, but building those relationships and understanding their use cases, their pain points, and being able to maintain some empathy toward the business in that regard is more helpful than any degree could be.
And then if you're business centric, how do you speak to technical stuff? That's a little tricky as well, right?
Yeah, I still keep up with my certifications. So I just got another SANS cert about 3 weeks ago. I passed another GIAC exam. So I'm a lifelong learner. So I took a break to go do the MBA, and I didn't do any technical certifications just because the time commit for the MBA. But as soon as I finished that, I jumped back into getting technical certifications. So whether it's the CEH, CCNA, the GWAPT, all the CompTIAs and CISSP, just all those things. Maintaining your technical competencies becomes very, very difficult when you're not hands-on keyboard doing the work, but still going toward these certifications and always ensuring you're studying, you're learning the new things that are coming out within that field, and you're applying them to the best of your ability within the context of your role is really important.
Yeah, I do hope that you catch some sleep. It looks like there's so much going on. Yeah.
Sometimes,
Yeah, but in this field, I really don't think security leaders really get to catch some break with so many things going on every day. So then the question is, what is your proudest achievement at PBS so far, and what aims do you have for the future in terms of security?
Yeah, I think we've accomplished a lot, right? We've been able to move the needle quite a bit. I don't think it was technology alone that helped us do that. I think my proudest achievement, kind of circling back to what I said earlier, was building the relationships. So I think that we've got excellent partnerships and relationships across the organization. We've got deep collaboration with people across the business. I think that's invaluable when you're trying to invoke or influence large scale change across an enterprise environment. Not having those relationships in place, it makes everything 10 times, if not 100 times more difficult. So my proudest moment, again, is having those people, those champions that we can talk to, that we can work together well with to ensure that we're moving the needle. And we don't always agree, and we're not always going in the perfectly same direction, but we're working together and we're moving the needle. And that's everything to me.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because that's actually this phrase I heard very, very similar to someone I spoke right before you. And that CISO was also mentioning it's not the security that you adopt, it's the people that you work with. Those are the biggest achievements. And what's one question you wish more people would ask you about cybersecurity, if I didn't ask it?
That's a good question. And I'm at a loss. Let me think about that. Something that I want people to ask me about cybersecurity. I would say just ask anything. Yeah, just ask questions. I think sometimes folks don't ask questions, and us cyber people can be weird sometimes. I get it. So like maybe a little standoffish, or just we talk super technical and we scare people away. But I just love when people ask questions generally. There's no stupid questions, right? If somebody thinks the question's stupid, then they've got other problems they have to resolve on their own. But yeah, just ask anything. I just love it when people approach me with something, because to me, it means they're thinking about it, right? It's not devoid in the things that are on their mind. And there's a lot of things to be on your mind. So to anybody listening to this who's not a cybersecurity professional, find out who your cyber person is and just ask them a question. Ask them something about phishing, or, hey, what's going on with AI and cybersecurity? And just just ask them something. It'll mean the world to them, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. I was speaking to someone also in a podcast the other day when the whole CrowdStrike battle happened, right? And then someone who is not from cyber background reached out to that person and said, hey, is this something that you're part of? Like, is this something related to cybersecurity? And I found it like, oh, it's so nice when people are not related to cybersecurity, you know, see the news, get interested.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it's exciting. One of the things that we like to do on our podcast, Jimmy, is typically our previous guest ask question to our next guest. So our previous guest, actually literally 1 hour ago,
Oh, jeez.
yeah, he asked you the following question. What are the top 3 messages that you're trying to communicate to the board, and how they might be the same or different as you communicate them to your staff?
Okay. I would say the 3 things that I always say when I'm briefing up is where we were, where we are, and where we're going. Right. So this was the state last time I spoke to you. This is the state today, and this is the state I hope we'll be in next time we meet. I think the thread through all of that, just thinking of Simon Sinek is the why, especially when you're talking about this is the direction we're going, right? Trying to help the board or our senior management team understand here's where we were, here's where we are. Hopefully I've shown progress there. But then most importantly, here's where we're going. And again, trying to define that northern star, rather. This is why we're going that direction, the reason behind it. I try to communicate the same thing to my team. One thing that I take back from the military is task and purpose. So when you lead in the military, your job is to give task and purpose. So there's often in the movies, you just get the task. You're just like, go do this thing. But the more effective way is go do this thing because this is the reason why. And you don't always have the time, the luxury of time to do that. But I try to do that with my staff as well. So I don't usually frame it with the here's where we are, or here's where we were, where we are, where we're going. More so the focus on where we're going and why we're doing that. We run usually a 2-year roadmap, or try to. All good roadmaps evolve quickly after you've made them. But really helping them understand the strategy, right? These are the things that are priorities over the next year or two. And here's why they're priorities. And here's what you should be expecting. I think managing the expectations of the team is really important. So they understand kind of why we're doing this, why it's important, and what's more important than the other things if there's too many things going on at one time.
Yeah. I think it looks like, so for the board, it's more of a broader overview, while for anyone who you're working with, it's more, how to say, have a little more focused attention. Would it be correct to say?
Yeah. So we brief the board, and I have historically on maturity models. So we're talking at a very high level, right? Here's a few domains, and here are the practices we're focusing on within them. Super, super high level. I almost never mention technology to the board. But with the team, it's definitely a technology conversation, right? We're talking about, we're going to procure this solution. We're going to, or evaluate the market for this solution. We're going to do some POCs. We're going to pick a solution. These are the success criteria. Here are the core capabilities that we're looking to do to implement these controls within these areas of the business. So it's way more detailed at the staff level.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting to hear. It's as you said, almost being bilingual when it comes to communicating to different teams, different priorities. And what question would you like to ask to our next guest?
Oh, geez. Is the next guest in an hour?
No. Actually, no.
Let me see. And the next guest will be a CISO?
Yes.
Okay. You had hit on it earlier, Sasha, about not sleeping well. I think anybody in this profession sometimes can be kept awake at night. So I guess my question to the next guest would be, how do you manage stress effectively, both personally and stress within the team? What are some things that you've done to manage stress personally and within the team that you find effective in this profession?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question because, yeah, I think being stress resilient is definitely one of the qualities that every security professional should have.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jimmy, for being part of the podcast. It's been so much fun. Lots of fun answers. I'm sure our listeners going to learn so much, whether to go ahead and pursue an MBA or how to communicate to the board effectively. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, Sasha, I really appreciate you having me. It's been a blast. Thank you.
Thanks.